Hello, good morning, and welcome to this TRA webinar session organized by Alice and DockstheFuture. This was originally a design as an invited session for the TRA 2020 in Helsinki that finally couldn't take place because of the COVID-19 crisis, but I'm happy it's been possible to reconvert it in today's webinar. My name is Salvador Furió. I'm the Director of Innovation and Port Cluster Development at Fundación Valencia Port and Chair of the Corridors, Hubs and Synchromodality Working Group at ALICE CTP. And first of all, I want to thank Manuela Flaki from Magellan for organizing this session and inviting me to be the moderator. The title chosen for today's webinar has been The Future of Ports, Vision 2030, bringing together innovative technologies, tools, and policies through a European network. Ports are facing important challenges, and innovation and technology are crucial in order to face them. The uncertainty of the global economy and trade, the concentration process at the maritime and logistics industry, the digital transformation and the automation of operations, the climate change and the energy transition, port city integration, they are all trends that are shaping the future of ports. And in order to discuss about all this and contribute towards the Ports of the Future vision, we have here today 5 top panelists which are already involved in research and innovation projects, developing and testing tools, technologies, and solutions that will contribute to this vision. 4 Horizon 2020 funded projects, DockstheFuture, COREALIS, PortForward, and Pixel, and an Interreg project, Rescue. Wiebe De Boer from Deltares will present us a very interesting serious game developed within the COREALIS project that allows together explore and discuss 4 development aspects involving different stakeholders and perspectives. Ignacio Lacalle from Universidad Politécnica de Valencia will present how the Pixel project proposes to drive digitization towards Ports of the Future through the development of an open IoT platform and the definition of the Port Environmental Index tool. Christian Blockner from Fraunhofer will present how to optimize operations through the virtual ports as part of the results of the PortForward project. Lori Ojala from the University of Turku will put the focus on the safety and security and the development of tools for systematic risk assessment, risk management, and incident response based on the results of the Rescue 2 project. And finally, Nicola Sacco from the University of Genoa will close the session with the presentation of the DockstheFuture project, which aims at defining the vision for the Ports of the Future 2030 and develop a decision support system tool helping ports in selecting and ranking measures to achieve their objective. Before starting with this presentation, just a couple of things about the dynamics of this webinar. As Viv has to leave before we finish the webinar, we will open a turn for a couple of questions after his presentation. You can post your questions and I will read them later. And after this, we will go forward through all the other 4 presentations, and we will have time later for questions. Each of the presentations will be around 15 minutes, and we will have 15-20 minutes later for questions. Anyway, you don't need to wait. You can pose your questions during the presentations, and later I will address them to the panelists. So we can start then with Wiebe De Boer. He has 10 years of professional experience in harbor and coastal engineering, and he works as a senior project manager and advisor at the Harbor, Coastal and Offshore Engineering Department of Deltares. Furthermore, he's a project developer at Smart Port on innovation projects in the Port of Rotterdam. in his work, Wiebe strives to apply new technologies and integrate knowledge from different disciplines to solve both today's and tomorrow's challenges. So, Wiebe, you have the floor. I will give you the role so that you can share your screen and start with your presentation. Please, Wiebe.
Thank you. 1 second. Can you see my presentation now?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you for the kind introduction. My name is Wiebe De Boer from Deltaris. I'm going to tell you something about the Port of the Future series game, which is part of the Horizon 2020 COREALIS project. First, a very brief introduction into the COREALIS project, where we work on a number of innovations. Those innovations are a track appointment system, just-in-time rail shuttle service for the Port of Valencia, the cargo flow optimizer, predictor for asset management, a green cookbook for renewable energy solutions, an innovation incubator, PortMod, which is about optimization of planning for container terminal operations, a brokerage platform which strives to basically balance demand and supply of trucks and fork lifters, etc. RT Port, which is 5G-enabled smart terminal operations, and last but not least, then the Port of the Future series game. In our COREALIS project, we have 5 living labs, which are the Port of Antwerp, the Port of Piraeus, the Port of Valencia, the Port of Amina Kotka, and last but not least, Livorno, Port of Livorno. So now I will only focus on the Port of the Future series game. So why the Port of the Future series game? This is actually because of there are many port developments still going on, and they accommodate economic and population growth. But it's becoming more and more complex because we strive for inclusive green growth, and there is not only attention nowadays for the economic aspects of port developments, but also for the environmental and social aspects. And with the game, we try to balance those 3 aspects: the people part, the planet, and the prosperity part. And those 3 are also referred to as the triple P. And with the new challenges that are coming up, more and more digitalization in ports, emerging technologies, the energy transition on renewable energy resources, and also climate change, it's more and more, let's say, complex to include all the stakeholders that are involved. And the Port of the Future series game is meant to, facilitate this stakeholder engagement. What are the objectives of the Port of the Future series game? It's first of all a game to raise awareness. We use a digital simulation environment where we simulate real-world events to make the players, which are then the stakeholders, aware of all the things that are taking place in the port and its environment. A second thing is that we want to promote stakeholder involvement to together explore the port of the future, let's say, so to together discuss different port development aspects and to discuss what the port may be heading to in the future. And a third objective is education. The game tries to facilitate multidisciplinary thinking, so thinking over the borders of your own expertise and to approach problems from different stakeholder perspectives. So the people that play the game have to step into the shoes of other stakeholders to basically get to know their way of thinking or what may be relevant to them, and that may help to come to a consensus also in real-world applications. So this is the why of the game. What is the game doing? So, we have a digital simulation environment where we have a fixture port. So this means that we can apply the game to basically every port context around the world because it's just a fixture place on Earth. And in that setting, there is different stakeholder groups that have to, think about their port of the future. I listed a number of the stakeholder groups over here. So it's, for example, a local government, a port authority, financial investors, NGOs, terminal operators, but it could also be citizens, for example. Then the game consists of a number of rounds, and in each round, each stakeholder group can select a number of measures to, well, help them to go to the port of the future, let's say. In the lower left corner, you will find example of game cards with these measures, and these measures have a description and a category. So we have, oh, I think someone has this sound on. Okay, so there's all kinds of measures related to energy, for example, hinterland connections, but also to, let's say, port city developments, environment. And all those measures are scored on the people, planet, and profit, and they have costs. So you have to select measures with a limited budget. And the effects of those measures are then shown on the screen. So here you see the people score, the planet score, the prosperity score, and also the budget. Then these scores are based on some KPIs. So for people, we use employment, recreation, and safety. For planet, ecosystems, emissions, and climate vulnerability. And for profit or prosperity, we use port profit, port city benefits, and operational efficiency. So one thing is to decide from each stakeholder what they want, but then the second step is to negotiate about that, because not every stakeholder will have the same opinion of what the port of the future may look like. So a very important part of the game is that the stakeholders negotiate about these measures, try to convince each other, and also try to come up with arguments that may be sensitive for the other stakeholders. And there's a very important role there for the facilitator that needs to stimulate this debate and, well, make sure that eventually the stakeholders come to consensus about the measures. And the whole idea is that then together the stakeholders try to balance the PPP scores in a number of rounds. Another thing to mention is that to make the Port of the Future series game more tailored to a specific port context, you can select a scenario to play, and you can select all kinds of events along the gameplay. The scenarios that have been included in the game set basically the initial stage for the gameplay. So basically they trigger the players to think about a certain challenge. And that could be, well, the challenges that I also mentioned in the beginning, for example, climate change adaptation, the energy transition. It could also be economic stagnation, which is, of course, very relevant at the moment. Innovation, which focuses on emerging technologies, sustainable port city development. And there's also a neutral scenario, which basically leaves that open. So it doesn't really trigger people to think in a certain direction, but you can just leave it open. Apart from those scenarios, we also have events, and those events are meant basically to, well, to also let people think about the unexpected and to trigger, let's say, different ways of thinking. For example, if you focus too much on innovation, it could be that you forget about, let's say, people that have jobs now in traditional industries, and those people may step up and strike, for example. Well, other things that could happen is that there is a high jobless rate. So what are you going to do about that? Or there's maybe a hurricane that hits the port. What are you going to do about that? So these scenarios are meant basically to kind of trigger additional debate amongst the stakeholders and also to think differently about the game and about the port of the future. To make it a little bit more lively, I made a small video to fly through the game to, well, guide you a little bit through the gameplay. This is then the start screen. So we, in this case, play a scenario. You can select all the scenarios that I just mentioned from a list. In this case, we select the climate change adaptation scenario. And then you will see that in this case, the people and the planet scores are minus, are low. So you need to do something about that. And you have a budget to spend to, well, make that happen. Well, then after the stakeholders have decided which two measures they want to take, in this case, it's just random measures that we selected, in this case, an island port development and a brownfield port development. then you will see for each measure that it is implemented in the gameplay. In this case, the brownfield port development is shown, and you see then also the effect on all the P's. So on the people, it's positive. On the planet, it's likewise, and for prosperity, it's positive. Now you also see that for the second measure that is taken, you get visual feedback, and you get the effects on the scores qualitatively. And then the quantitative scores will be on the main screen, as you can see now. So here there's still something to do on planet, for example. Then in the second round, you can redo. Basically, there can be an event in between, but then also the players can again select measures, of course, taking account for the scores of people, planet, and prosperity and the budget. And you can also make use of the fact that there are multiple rounds. For example, if you give away something as a stakeholder in the first round, you may say, well, I want something back from you in the second round. So these negotiation techniques and how to negotiate and how to do these things together are an important part of the game. So, well, you can do this for multiple rounds. There can be events in between. And at the end of the game, well, you will see what has happened. In this case, you see that the budget has gone down tremendously and prosperity went up, but the planet score was still low. Then there is an important role for the facilitator to, well, discuss with the stakeholders what has happened, why does it has it happened, what could have been done differently, and what have we learned about this. And that is an important part of the game because that is part of the awareness raising that we would like to achieve. So I come to the end of my presentation with this slide, so it's some concluding remarks. So the focus of this game is on raising awareness and exploring, let's say, different strategies and different measures for the port of the future. It's not really a decision-making tool as such because the scores are rather qualitative and not really quantitative. So this game can be a start of a decision-making process, but it will not deliver the facts and figures to make the actual decisions. It will just, well, raise awareness of what could be important for those decisions. So the feedback that we got from past experiences, not only in the COREALIS project, but also in previous game workshops, is that it is a very pleasant and interactive way of learning about port development and challenges in general, but also that it helped to better understand the different aspects of port sustainability, understand different stakeholder viewpoints, and to really think differently about, well, the port of the future. So if you want more information on the game, well, you can visit the website of COREALIS, which is mentioned here, or you can visit the Deltaris website, where we have some more information on the Port of the Future series game. And well, you can also find us on all the social media channels if you want, or send me an email at the email address that I listed over here. So for now, I want to thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to answer questions if there are some.
Okay, thank you very much, Viv. There are a couple of questions. One is related to the aim of the game, whether it is just to explore the complexity of the port transition, or also there are education aims. I will add also, what is the specific target for the game? It's directed towards professionals, or it could be used also in schools to increase the awareness? Or...
Okay, yeah, so that's two questions basically. Yeah, so is it awareness raising or education? It's a little bit of both. So it's mainly awareness raising, but of course there's also an education component in there, because it makes people aware of what is happening in the port, but also what could measures do to different things. So showing this, let's say, overall effects. And yes, it can be, it was designed for more a professional context, but it's also used in universities to basically make students aware of these complex stakeholder processes that are at stake in port developments, and not focusing on the technical aspects only.
Okay, thank you. And there is another question saying, do players collaborate in the game as well? I don't know if I understand well, but maybe it's about what is how interactive is with.
Yeah, so it's good to mention maybe that this game is actually played in a physical setting, so it's not easy to do this online. So it's really with a group of stakeholders together, which are then subdivided into different groups. And each group has to think about their strategy to, well, how am I going to achieve the things that I want to achieve in my port of the future? But of course, there's collaboration is needed, because you need the other stakeholders also to, well, make the final decisions. And you need to make sure that, well, everybody gets a little piece of the pie, let's say. It is about collaboration. Well, that's basically the main aim of the game. So it's not about winning as such, it's about winning together.
Thanks very much. So there are no more questions. I don't know if maybe there is any question from the panelists.
Yeah, I would like to make one. Yes. Hello, Viv and everyone. I would like to know a little bit more about what is behind the rationale you are applying whenever one of the players selects one card or the other. Under which rationale are you just summing up or diminishing points in one or the other PPPs and perspectives? Is there any formal rationale behind?
Yes, I didn't mention it in the presentation because, well, it can be quite extensive, the answer, but I try to make it short. So what we did, basically, I showed you for all the 3 Ps, which KPIs we used. So that's just a number of KPIs, could have been more, but to make it a little bit handleable, we used these 3 KPIs per P, and then we scored each measure and each event also on a scale of -5 to 5, and these are just points. It's based on expert judgment. So we used, well, basically 2 experts for each measure to also have some cross-validation. And it's about the relative impacts of those measures. So for example, if you have a port expansion, that will have a larger effect than only electrification of some port equipment, for example. So then relatively we score on -5 to 5, so it's quite qualitatively. We also checked a little bit in literature whether let's say the magnitude of those scores is a bit realistic. And those scores were then eventually added to the cards, and that gives an idea of where it's what the impact may be. Does that answer your question?
Totally. Thank you very much, Viv. It's pretty interesting. Okay. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.